Hey, thanks for joining me today for this episode of Curves Welcome, a podcast about facing and embracing the curves of life. If this is your first time tuning in, this is Susie Carr. Hello, today I am here with Ann Hince to chat about self-healing and the depth of awareness that surrounds that. I'd like to share a little bit about Ann first. When Ann was 19, she woke one morning to find her mother dead in her bathroom. 20 years later, the tears from that trauma were still just under the surface. Ann found a simple technique that helped her release these emotions. But she went further and can now put her awareness inside her body, what she calls insight or inward sight. Ann has found that seeking out our truth, what we truly feel, and accepting those feelings is the key to inner peace. Ann, I want to welcome you to the Curves Welcome podcast. It is fantastic to have you here with us today.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
I have to say that is one of the strongest introductions I have read emotionally. It really struck me, that first line, of course. My heart pounded when I read it. And I am just really curious to learn more about your journey and to understand where you came from and where you are today as somebody who self-heals and understands that depth of awareness that it takes to self-heal. So can you talk us through the initial stages that have brought you to this point in your life of self-healing?
I think like a lot of us, I had a lot of trauma in childhood. That was the big defining moment. But both my parents were alcoholics. So I think I had PTSD. My mind was so fearful all the time. And I was really reactive. It seemed like I reacted to things people said more than other people did. And I so wanted to have a peaceful mind. And, I tried many things over the years, mostly dietary things, because I found diet really changed things, but it never seemed to change things ongoing. Like something would change for a couple of weeks and then I'd be back to where I was before. So it wasn't until I was in my late 30s and I was a stay-at-home mom with two young boys. And I can't remember why, but I went to a doctor's appointment for some reason. And he noticed that I was more stressed than I should be in that position. So he asked me what my stress level was. And it was an 8 out of 10. And I knew straight away that it was because of that trauma 2 decades earlier, because I could feel that the tears were just under the surface, right? If I actually thought about the event, the tears were there. So he used this technique with me. It's called EFT, short for Emotional Freedom Technique. It's also called tapping. It's very popular. A lot of people know about it, but it's so powerful. So after about 15 minutes, I walked away from that doctor's appointment, being able to tell the story of her death without the emotions coming back up. So I knew it was something that could really have an impact on my life.
In 15 minutes.
Yes. Now that was just the surface layer. I've come to realize that there are layers and layers and layers upon layers. So there's a lot to go through. So when I went home, within that couple of days there, we had a cat, a 17-year-old cat that needed daily saline shots. And I tried it. I gave him the first shot. My hand was shaking so much that I knew I just couldn't do this every day. So I thought, okay, I can test out this technique. So I did. I tapped on myself about my fear of hurting him, the fear around injections, and my history around injections. And the next time the injection, the needle just slid right in, like my hand was totally calm. So I knew there was real power in this technique. So that's where I started. I started using it every day. I started noticing, and to begin with, it would only happen once or twice a day. I'd actually notice when I was reacting or when I was emotional. And then I would start tapping. And then I started, because I knew how powerful it was at that point, I actually wrote down all the emotional memories that I could remember from my life, and I tapped through them one each day. And I noticed that my mind was becoming quiet and peaceful. It was so nice. And I realized at that point, once my mind was quieter, I realized that the words that I had been playing in my mind, the words that criticized myself, the words that judged other people, and I hated that, they were my dad's words that I had programmed into myself from childhood. And I would just, say the words over and over again, because that's what we do.
Wow.
So I had to get beyond that to be able to look back and say, oh, that was dad's words.
Wow. So there was talk about self-awareness. I mean, that right there sounds like that is the biggest key, is that self-awareness of being able to do that. You brought up so many points, the reactivity. I think that a lot of us can relate to reactive type of personalities. I know I can be reactive when I'm not self-aware that I should be proactive. And being reactive is definitely not the place I feel power, self-empowerment comes from. It is really almost like a victim mentality, and it puts you in a state of deficit in a way, instead of that sense of being able to slow yourself down and realize that you have control over this. And what you said about the ejections in your cat, I can so relate to that on a little bit of a different level, because I remember when my dog was alive, she had this problem with her eye. She kept getting these corneal ulcers, and she had to have these surgeries done. And it was imperative that I had to stick these drops in her eye 3 times a day. If I didn't, she could lose her eye. And so that pressure that put on me, trying to put these drops in her eye, she was very reactive. She would not let me put these in. She would turn into a demon. And I would get so worked up around these 3 points during the day that my life became a living hell, if you, lack of a better word, for the time that I had to do this, which was months long. And gosh, what I would have given to have had a technique like tapping. I didn't even know about tapping, which brings me to the next point. For listeners who are listening in, who are like me and don't know what that means, can you give us just a small description of what actually that technique actually means, and where somebody might be able to find out more information on how to learn, ways to learn how to do it?
Sure. It's a very simple technique, and you can learn it in just a few minutes. But basically what you're doing is tapping on the ends of meridian systems. So tapping on about 10 points in the body as you're talking through what it is, what your actual truth is. Like, I'm afraid that I'm going to hurt my cat or my dog, right? This fear I'm feeling that I'm going to hurt my cat. I'm tapping on the ends of meridian points, for those who can see this, as I'm saying it. And the words I'm using are bringing the emotion back into the body. And this tapping process releases the energetic charge that's stored in the body around the words or the emotions.
Oh, I like that there's something that you can physically do, because I'm going to be honest with you. Sometimes I've tried some certain techniques where it's all mental, and it's like, okay, meditate, and you got to get into that state. And then I feel so like such a failure because I can never get into that state sometimes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I feel like such a failure. Am I ever going to be able to overcome this? But having some kind of a physical activity along with that, I feel like that makes it more tangible. And I can already tell, just hearing that's something that I could probably do and be successful at.
Absolutely. That's why it was the first step on my journey, because when I started this, I had no idea how I felt, right? Someone could ask me, how are you feeling today, Anne? It's like, I'm okay. I had no concept of how I felt, because it had been my defense mechanism. I smiled as a child, because if I smiled, my dad wouldn't say anything to me. So I didn't know how I felt. So this tapping technique, this EFT, opened up that awareness. So I started to become aware of how I felt, of my emotions. So absolutely, when you don't know much about how you feel, it's a great technique, because you can just tap. If you're in some kind of emotional crisis, right, something's happened and you're really feeling emotion, the emotion is already in the body, all you have to do is tap. You don't even have to say any words, because the words are just to bring the emotion into the body. And if it's already there, you don't need to say anything. So I became aware of the emotions, but then I started to become aware of the physical sensations underneath the emotions, right? So if you've got fear, you might not realize it, and I certainly didn't to begin with, but if you've got fear, you're actually holding tension in the body. And once you become aware at this deeper level, you can feel where that tension is, right? It might be tension in the solar plexus, might be tension in the jaw, right? There'll be different places in your body where you're feeling those emotions. And that's the next level of awareness.
Yes. And I would imagine that everybody who has fear feels it somewhere and they're just not aware of where they're feeling it. Right.
Absolutely.
I feel like when I get fearful, and I have a funny little quick story to tell you, I get stress intense right in my shoulders, really, really bad, to the point where I actually, if I roll my neck, it really cracks and it releases that, I guess, that energy. I'm not sure if maybe there's a prime meridian around the neckline. I'm not sure, or the shoulders. But the other day I was in one of my bathrooms and there was a huge spider in there with me, huge black spider, a wolf spider. And I'm one of the people, all right. So years ago, I would be very fearful of these things and I wouldn't be able to, I'd want to burn my house down before I deal with that. But then I learned to embrace insects and take pictures of them and start to enjoy their beauty. But it's been a long time since I've seen a big spider. I will be honest, years. And so this caught me off guard. And so my spouse, I was like, oh, there's a big spider in the bathroom. Should we take it outside? And my spouse was like, well, why? It's cold outside. The spider's going to die if we bring it out there. Why don't we just take pictures of it and embrace it and welcome it into our home? And then it won't bother us. And that fear that I initially had, it was all up in my shoulders. And I was so fearful of even walking by my bathroom and like, oh my God, what if he jumps out at me? Or I don't know what I expected, but it was so debilitating. And I thought, come on, you're better than this. So embrace it. So I did. We took our cameras out. We started taking pictures. With the phone, we took pictures of the spider. And then I just watched it, and I just watched it crawl, and I watched it do its thing. And then I haven't seen it. It's been a week. I haven't seen it. And I'm not afraid of it anymore because I faced it and I embraced it. That was being self-aware, I guess, on some level. But you talk about that tension that we hold. And I know that I held a lot of tension in my neck and my shoulders that day. And it actually gave me a headache.
Right. So if I was doing that with tapping, I would have tapped about, I really am afraid of this spider. I don't like it. I'm not even sure I like what my spouse is saying, because I don't know if I want this in my house. And then if I was aware of that tension, it's like I can feel this fear in my shoulders. I can feel it in the muscles and the tightness in my shoulders. I'm tapping, for those who can't see me, tapping as I say this. Those are the things I would say as I'm tapping, and just allow, the actual truth of what you're feeling. And sometimes it can just be the words. It's like, oh my goodness, my spouse just said this, right? And you've just got the words to deal with. Or you can, at the deeper level, the emotions, and that I'm really scared of this spider because I'm afraid it's going to, whatever. I'm afraid it's going to crawl on me. I'm afraid it's going to bite me. Whatever the fear is, you would address it and just let that energy flow out of the body.
Yeah. Is it similar to what you're talking about with prime meridians and all? Is it similar to acupuncture and how that releases certain energy? But this is something obviously you don't need acupuncture for. But is it on the same sort of wavelength in a way?
It is. It's similar to acupressure because we're really just tapping on those acupressure points.
Okay. Yes. Because I've experienced acupuncture at one point in my life. Well, actually several times in my life, like 5 different appointments. And it was amazing. It was very eye-opening, jaw-dropping. And if this is anything like that, then I definitely want to learn more about it. I definitely do. So You've talked about, I guess, this focused awareness and how somebody can sort of let go of stored emotions, because when we store emotions, that really is physically demanding on us. And it's really detrimental to our health as well. Can you speak a little bit about that and why it's so important for us to figure out ways to help release these stored emotions? I mean, some people might not feel I can live with it, but maybe there's a better way.
Well, we can certainly live with it, but it lives inside of our body. And that's what I've realized as I went deeper and deeper, it's all stored inside of us. So as I became aware of these physical sensations, I was actually in a class at the time, a group studying A Course in Miracles, which is really difficult to understand. But the person who led the group said, it's not about meditation. You don't have to meditate, which I really liked because like you, like I think maybe you, I didn't want to meditate. But he said it's about feeling your feelings. So I didn't know what that meant at the time because I just started tapping. But as I did it more and more, I decided, okay, I'm going to try and do what he says, because he didn't explain how to do it. How do you feel your feelings? Well, I wanted to do that. So and now I was aware of the physical sensations underneath these emotions. So I would actually hold my awareness on the physical sensations. Once I thought a thought that had emotion, I could feel myself reacting. I would feel where those sensations were in my body, and I would hold myself like a statue. I'd actually stop breathing. I would hold my breath because I wanted to keep that physical sensation inside my body. I just wanted to feel it. What does it feel like to feel fear? Because I'd suppressed it for decades, right? I'd never allowed fear just to pass through my body. So I would feel it, and I would need to take a breath, and then I would notice that it had shifted. And so then I'd think the same thought again. Oh, is that fear still there? Is it in the same place? Does it feel the same intensity? And normally it had changed somewhat. And then I would feel it again. And then I'd keep going with the same thought, feeling the emotion and letting it subside. And eventually I'd be able to think that thought, and the emotion would no longer be there, which is freedom. Right. So I did this a lot. And then I would start working on collective traumas. So I would think about 9/11. I would think about the Loma Prieta earthquake. I would bring those feelings, that whole set of horrible feelings, into my body and just allow it to dissipate. Mm-hmm. And it would dissipate. And then at some point I found I could keep my awareness inside my body. It's kind of like when you've got a toothache or a stomach ache, you know where that feeling is. You can feel that pain. But once it's gone, you can't normally put your awareness back to where it was. So I could do that. I can hold the awareness in the root of my tooth and hold it there. So I go around on the inside and I feel where the next area of tension is, the next layer, and I hold my awareness on it, and it dissipates just like it did when I was feeling my feelings, or just like it did with the EFT. It's the same process. It's just on a deeper level.
Yeah. And this is making me think about something that it's a little different, but when I look at the stars shining in the evening sky, if I look directly at a star, it actually disappears. But when I look a little to its peripheral, it's there. And the minute I look at it, it disappears. And it kind of reminds me of that sort of focused attention on something like that, where it sounds like similar to what you're saying right now. Like if I have a pain in the tip of my finger and I'm aware of that, the moment that I become deeply aware of that, it subsides. It could subside. And I don't know is that what you are saying in effect?
Yes, we hold once you fully accept something, and it could be the words, it could be the emotions, it could be the physical sensation, or it could be the tension on the inside, all just different levels of the same thing. Once we fully accept it, it dissipates. You've got to experience it to really believe it. But I've experienced it on all these levels, and absolutely. Now on the inside, I can actually, because I can get inside my head, I actually hear it and feel it release. And I know that it was the tension. It's in the connective tissue. That's what I'm releasing. So I believe all this stuff, all these emotions are actually held in the connective tissue of the body, which is everywhere. It's everywhere inside of us.
That isn't me. Do you think that, I'm going to say the average person, meaning, everyday person, do you think, who's never done this, do you feel like that is possible for them to get to that point? Because I really hope so, because I would love to be able to get to a point where, and it's making sense to me what you're saying, that it's truly, you're facing and embracing the pain, the emotions, whether those be pleasure or pain. I mean, I think we can feel emotions on many different levels, and the extremes, if anything, are never good. Right? The extremes of high or low are never good. It's that balance we're trying to find. And I feel like, so to me, I think that would be great to be able to achieve that sort of balance in life, and to be able to have more control over some of the things that are happening in our body, and to be proactive about it instead of reactive. So not waiting for a heart attack, instead be proactive and start to mend your heart before it breaks.
Absolutely. I believe everyone has the capacity to do this for sure. And I mean, it just takes the will to do it.
Yeah.
Right? So has to be a little push at the beginning. It's like, okay, I'm going to do this. And the way that really helped me that I embraced is I look at it through the law of attraction. So I don't think of the law of attraction as the way, a lot of other people do, but it's a universal principle, and it's working all the time, right? So every second of every day, I am emitting a signal, and I am attracting back to me based on that signal. And the whole of me is that signal, so it's my outer appearance, it's my hair, it's my clothes, it's how big I am. All that is part of my signal. But the biggest part to me is the tension, the physical tension that's held in our connective tissue. And if we can release that, we can change our future. So I would think during the day, okay, what's my signal right now? How do I feel? Do I want to feel this way again in the future? And if I don't, I want to change how I feel right now. Mm-hmm. So I could tap, right, and release some tension and just relax a little bit more in this moment. And then in the future, I'm going to get more of this relaxed feeling. So that I use that throughout the day and ask myself, how am I feeling right now?
That's a great, powerful. I love questions. I love powerful questions. Those questions that make your brain search for answers. And when you ask a question that is powerful like that, how am I feeling right now? Your brain is going to go on a search until it finds the answer to that. And the truth, we don't, I say we don't lie to ourselves. I think, well, we do lie to ourselves sometimes, but I feel like a question like that is open-ended enough where it is one that it's hard to run. It's hard to retreat from that kind of a question. You're going to say, I'm not feeling great right now. No, I'm not feeling great. And so having that answer, it puts you in the power position to be able to do something proactively about that at that point.
Right. Well, especially if you know that that's coming back to you. It's like, okay, do I want to feel this way again? No, I don't. That was one of my answers often. It's like, I don't want to feel this way again. So, okay, so I have to change it right now.
Mm-hmm. What you said about the frequency, a lot of times I'm a very visual person. So for me, I remember reading, I've read a lot about the law of attraction, and I'm a firm believer in that as well. And one of the things that helps to ground me is, especially when I'm walking out in nature or around campus. I work at a university. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll go for a walk when I'm feeling like stressed or need to work through some things in my mind. And at certain points along the campus, there are towers, like radio towers, I guess. And I look at that and I think, okay, that's a signal. Like, it's a visual to me, and I can visually think to myself, what frequency am I on right now? Do I want to be on that frequency? No, I'd rather be on the frequency of health versus stress. And it really does put things into perspective. It really does, right, by actually affirming that that's what you want to do. Right.
Now, one of the things that I had to realize along the way is that I don't want to try and feel differently. Right. I don't want to do the positive thinking thing, because if I do that, I'm actually suppressing the actual thoughts that I'm feeling right now.
This is powerful.
The power is in releasing the tension or the emotion around the actual thought that I'm feeling right now.
I love that, because Ann, so many times, again, it's that feeling of, gosh, I'm failing at this because I can't think positively right now. There's nothing positive about whatever, my washing machine breaking down and costing me $1,000. There's nothing wonderful about that. And yet I'm supposed to think positive thoughts. And it puts you in a seat of, well, gosh, I can't think positively about this, so I must be failing at this. And then all of a sudden you feel those deflated feelings. I love what you just said, that it's okay to experience that feeling of frustration. Recognize it, right? Recognize that feeling of frustration.
Right.
Face it and embrace it.
Right. Because that's the truth. That's your actual truth, right? That feeling that you're having is your actual truth. If you try and think positive at that point, you're suppressing that actual truth. But as we said, on all these different levels, it's the acceptance of the actual thing that's happening that allows it to dissolve.
That old saying, what you resist persists, right? Is that how it goes?
Yes, it is.
Right. So if you resist that, if I resisted that feeling of frustration when my washing machine broke, then it's going to persist. It probably will persist for days, weeks on end, even.
Right. Well, it's a signal that's living inside of you, right? That you've held it down, you've suppressed it in there. So it's still attracting. And still attracting in your future that same feeling of frustration. So wouldn't it be better just to feel it right now and to let it go? Then the next time you have something that in the past would have created that reaction, it will now create something different inside of you.
Yes.
That's how we change our future.
Yes. And so by embracing it, facing it, feeling it, you're able to let it go by doing that. And by the technique you're talking about, the tapping technique, and using that physical tapping to be able to also just power up that ability for us to be able to eventually let go of those emotions.
Yeah, just the physical process of the tapping lets it go. It lets it flow out of the body, and then it's gone.
Whew. Wow. That's all right. So now I feel like I read something. I don't know if it was on your profile or not, where we met, or if you actually sent this to me, but something about you were able to manipulate your jaw. Talk us through this, because I'm not doing any service right now, even setting up the story, because I'm like, my mind is boggled and I really want to wrap my brain around what that means. Like, tell us your story about that.
Sure. Well, like I said, when I'm going inside of my face now, I can feel and hear this tension release, which I know is the releasing of the connective tissue. And I have felt at times that the bones actually shift, which is it was kind of scary a little time, when this first started happening. I didn't know if I was hurting myself, but, I'm on a path. So I just kept going. And I recently had a new head x-ray taken just because of the orthodontic work that I've been having. And I had a comparison one from 8 years ago. And to see the physical changes that have happened, I mean, it blew my mind, right? My whole jaw was way off to the side, and it's now much more centered. My eye sockets were not aligned, and now they're more aligned. And my neck, I have scoliosis. So my neck has been straightening, and I feel, I'm working, it's shifting every day. So I would love to have a new x-ray even now, because I know things have shifted since then. And even my tooth roots have grown. So it's really interesting to see what these changes, and it's just a release of tension on the inside at a deeper and deeper level.
I'm speechless. One of the things that I'm speechless about is I have scoliosis as well. And so when I was 13, I was diagnosed with a double curvature of the spine. And that scared the heck out of me, because I thought, oh my gosh, what does this mean? Am I going to be crippled? Like, am I going to be able to do sports? And I was able to do all of that. But I did have to wear a machine every night to go to bed. That was very painful, to help my spine to help the muscles stay awake while I was asleep, so that my spine would continue to and just not get worse. It was not supposed to make my spine better. It was just supposed to make it from getting worse. And as a teenager, I don't even know how I understood how to do this. I to this day, I don't know how I did it, but I would call it power of visualization. I would imagine my spine straightening. I would sit there every night and imagine my spine straightening out. And lo and behold, after 4 years of treatment, by the final time I went, my spine had dramatically improved. The curvature had diminished so much. I mean, I had pretty severe curvature, double curve. And this thing, to this day, the last x-ray I had, it's maintaining that, just a slight curve, a slight double curve. My spouse and I we laugh about it. You can't heal a headache, but you can straighten your spine, like just little things like that. And I'm like, I don't know how I did it, but I just imagined my spine straight. I can't explain it any other way, but I feel like this conversation is sort of highlighting that perhaps what I really was doing was releasing that tension, was seeing the spine the way it was, and then imagining it, just releasing that tension, that energy, like a mental massage for my spine, if you will. That's the only way I can explain it. And whatever I did, it worked. And I really want to tap into that again and figure out more of a tangible way to actually be able to apply this to my life now.
Right. Because that's a very mental way. And I'm very much in the physical. I know, you hear people talk about going inside, and most of the time, I think, well, at least how I used to understand it is they would mean go into the mind, right? Go into the thinking mind. And I'm totally not in the thinking mind. I'm maybe in the feeling mind if there's a different part of the mind that is feeling. But I'm not thinking as I'm doing this. I'm just feeling the tension. And at this point, I still don't fully understand where my scoliosis started from, but almost all the tension seems like it starts somewhere in the face. So that's where I'm the neck, because that's where I'm releasing the deepest, oldest tension is in there. And I'm thinking it's from the facial expressions that we put on as children when we don't know, or we're not allowed to express the feelings and the emotions. We hold them in. And when we do that, we have a facial expression, which is pulling on the connective tissue inside. And I think it just stays that way.
Wow. Gosh, this conversation has been so insightful, and I just wish it could keep going on and on, but I don't want to take up your whole day. Is there any kind of last thoughts that you want to share with listeners about your journey, or even how people might be able to get in touch with you? Are you writing a book? Because you really should be writing a book about these experiences if you haven't done so already.
I do have a book. It's called A Pathway to Insight, and it does talk through all these steps. And, hopefully other people will follow the steps too, because I would love other people to experience this as well. I would say to people who are on that first step of the journey is just start becoming aware of how you're feeling during the day. Just notice when you're reacting, notice the thoughts behind that reaction. And that's just the first part of awareness. And it just can build on that. So I do have other ways people can contact me. I have a public Facebook page I love to interact on. I have a website, annhince.com. The x-rays are on there. I also have a YouTube channel. I've put several YouTube videos up there explaining these steps in a little more detail. And there's a demo of EFT and a demo of feeling your feelings are on there. There are many videos online about EFT. You can learn about EFT from many places, but just know a lot of the people these days have gone more into the positive. But it's only the negative that's stored in the body. So the power of EFT is working on the negative. So just keep that in mind.
Oh, that is super helpful. And I'll link to all of those. I'll put all the links in the description as well. If you're watching this on YouTube, it'll be there. If you're listening to it on your podcast player, it'll be in the show notes. And so, yes, I'm going to run out and get that book because I am completely intrigued by everything you shared with me today. And I hope the listeners, anyone listening out there, is equally, if not more, intrigued as well. And so here's to really learning how to self-heal, facing and embracing those negative emotions and just letting them go so we can live our best life. Thank you so much, Ann, for being here with us today.
Thank you. It's been great.
Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, go out there and continue to learn, grow, and embrace life's curves.